When you're a leader, at some point you have to negotiate an executive compensation package. That's what we're going to talk about in this discussion. We're going to share all kinds of tips, ideas, how to prepare, and what to say in that negotiation. Joining me is leadership coach Dr. Jeff Kaplan, who actually helps executives negotiate their compensation packages. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Raj. Great to be here.
Let's talk about the preparation that you have to do in your own head before you go into that negotiation. What are the things that an executive should be thinking about?
The first two things you want to think about is one, what's your floor and what's your ceiling? And then to the degree that you can, what's their floor and what's their ceiling, right? So you really want to know what the zone is, right? What's your walk away? If they give me less than this, and it's not just comps, you have to know what your priorities are, like what's important around location or there's comp package and there's other pieces. And then but what would be like amazing, right? And then you need to know what theirs is, right? Because what they offer you is what they think they can get away with, not what they necessarily you're worth.
What are the ways to find out what theirs is? Because sometimes they keep that close to their chest.
Obviously, if it's a public company, then it's available online. Otherwise, they've had the position in the past. If you happen to know people that work there and know what the salaries are, you can certainly also ask them, like, what's the range for this? Some leaders are better at this than others, where they're able to ask at the beginning, where they say, just obviously, this being a good fit is most important, but salary and benefits are going to be important as well, just to make sure that we are on the same page before either one of us goes too far down this road. What is the range for this position?
That's a
Right.
great way to phrase it. Yeah. And
Yeah,
you just get that out front because you don't want to waste their time and they certainly don't want to waste yours. And that way it gets it up front.
that's correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you start thinking about the low and the high. And it's interesting. You really need to know theirs as well as yours, because sometimes once they give you a range, they're almost always thinking they're going to try to get you middle to lower side. And you're thinking, oh, that's their range. I'm going to be on the higher side. And it almost always, I don't think I've ever seen a situation where that either miscommunication or that understanding didn't happen. So how do you start to align those? Let's say you have some overlap.
Yeah. Right. So first of all, the biggest mistake that I see people make is they literally negotiate against themselves at the beginning and then throughout. So at the beginning, they're thinking, okay, I'm somewhere between whatever 400 and 550 would be great. And so then they come in and I don't know, about 450. And they're forgetting that this is a negotiation, because as soon as you put a number out, they're going, okay, so that's your top line. And then they're just going to try to work that down.
Yeah. And we know that in a full executive compensation package, salary is just a component of it.
Right.
There's quite a bit more. You alluded to location, other benefits that would be part of the package. That could include time off. And I know sometimes leaders take less time off than maybe some of their staff, but that could be important. I know that in Europe, for example, people take more time off than they do here in the United States. And so what are some of the other ways to approach your thought process as you figure out what's the real compensation range that you would be comfortable with?
One of the factors that often people don't think about unless they do this for a living, or sometimes if they're really in it or have a really good lawyer who's helping them with this, is severance. And the frame of reference, to answer your question, is about risk. Look, I've been at my current company for 7 years, and I've built a really solid reputation. Obviously, I'm entertaining this conversation because I really love what your company's doing, the vision for the future, this particular role. I think I could add a lot of value. I think it'd be a great opportunity. That said, we both know that me leaving my current organization, where I built a lot of relationships, is risky. And basically what we're looking to do is manage some of that risk. So when you say to me, you give me a 3-month severance package, that's a really hard pill to swallow, because 3 months is not that. If you think I'm the right person, let's help that risk tolerance, right? And a year is something that I'd be much more comfortable with.
And I think one of the things many executives forget about is how long it actually takes to get an executive role. And 3 months is just a blink, actually, right? For really senior level roles, it can take 6 months to a year. And so that's why that should be part of that severance package, so that you have some cushion to fall back on. So let's talk about the stages of the actual negotiation. And I know you've got some do's and don'ts, things that people should be thinking about. So let's start with some of those. Now that you have a sense of their range and a sense of your range, how do you actually open up that dialogue? They will say, "What are you looking to make?" And your response should be,
Yeah, a lot of times they say, "What are you making at your current job?" And what I want to say is, "What are you making?" And what I'm like, to me, that's an irrelevant question, because what I'm
Mhm,
making in my current job is based on when I first got hired and then bumps I got along the way. It's not necessarily worth my current value, nor is it necessarily worth the what are we doing in this company. To me, it's about the value.
mhm.
And so it's almost, what do you think what do you think the person in this role, right, what they'll be doing, what do you think that's worth? And so if they say, they're most likely not gonna, they're probably gonna want to offer you something, right? They may want to know again what you're currently making. But
Mhm.
I would always flip it back on them. Try to get them to show their hand first, right? What is the range? And then they say, we can pay you X. What you say
So your response to
is
their
your
answer is,
response is X.
"Okay."
And you're inside, you're going, "Wow, that's great. I'd
Right,
still really
right.
love another
Yeah.
50." And,
It reminds me of the old Homer Simpson joke was reject the first offer, reject the first offer, and the
yeah.
first offer is a
Well,
beer.
yeah, and
So,
there was an
yeah.
Office
Uh,
episode too. I actually teach in negotiations at this, company, and we use a clip from The Office where Michael Scott is it's a funny episode. Just look up Michael Scott negotiating, whatever. And you say, "I'm gonna really need I appreciate the offer. I'm gonna really need to think about it. I'm gonna need to talk to my spouse or my family. Give me" you definitely don't wanna say yes on the spot. So you
right.
want them to let you the feeling that you want them to have is that, yes, I'm excited about the possibility of working here, and I appreciate the offer, but wow, I'm a little disappointed. Because if you go, here's, you talk about do's and don'ts, you don't want to go too far where they think either you're being overly like selfish, or you're not really loving the opportunity, right? So you want to get across two messages: loving the opportunity, love the idea of it, and eh. And then a lot of times I've seen this, Raj. I've seen where somebody has taken this advice, they've used it, and then the other side negotiated against themselves and came back and said, "How about this?" And my person was like, "Great." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Then that's great."
Yeah, and that's a risk we can talk about, like, how to avoid something like that. Okay, so they give you an offer. Your response is, "Not what I was expecting," or "Lower than I was expecting," or maybe just, and that's it. I know that
Y-
sometimes I've seen another response work, and that is, "How did you come up with that?" And so what I
Right.
find is that kind of puts them on the spot that they either they've got research that shows that's the range, or that's what the last person made, or whatever it is, but sometimes that can help enlighten. And just as a small side note, that's actually the first response I will say when someone's trying to buy a company also. Is I remember when I was negotiating sales of my businesses in
Right.
the past, and they'd come back with an offer, I'd be like, "How did you come up with that number?" And then you can start to poke holes at it
Yeah,
and try to
I
get
love it.
higher.
No calls. I love it.
Yeah.
I've heard you say you immediately tell them a 10% higher, right? Like, they if it's a lower job, it's
Yeah.
200,000, and I was thinking 220, or maybe it's a 20% thing. I was thinking 480. But then you just set the ceiling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love your idea
Yeah.
of how did you come up with
How
that
did you
number?
come up with that number? So, what would be the next step then? You're waiting for them to come back with a response, and what usually happens?
Okay, so at that point, now you're looking at the offer, right? You have a written offer, and now you're going to start bringing in some of the other pieces. So hopefully, on the front end, you've already decided what is most important to you, right? You might be willing to let go of some salary if you get some other things in place, right?
Mhm.
And so you really want, in a good negotiation, you truly are looking for a win. This isn't about, you want them to feel good and you want to feel great. It's not about them feeling like you raked them over the coals, and
Right,
it's not
yeah.
about you feeling like you're giving up what you really want.
Yeah.
So you might come back and you literally say, "Look, again, I really appreciated the offer. talked it over with my spouse, if that's the case, even if your spouse is just whatever. And here's what we feel would be right for the family and for this opportunity and for the value they think that it could provide. And so you tell them a number and then you say, look, we'd be willing to budge here, but this is really important to us. And now you're really being honest about what your interests are. That you are winning this conversation, Raj, when when it feels like they are your partner trying to really advocate for you on your behalf. And the way they would do that is if it really looks like you're being very transparent and sharing your interests, sharing that this is what's really most important here. Yes, I would love this higher salary, but I could feel okay about that if we could get these other pieces lined up.
Okay. So then you go back and forth on what those other pieces could be. And let's dive into that because that's where sometimes things can fall apart or things can really make what seems like a smaller salary actually be something much bigger in the long scheme of things. It'll be different whether you're negotiating for a role in a nonprofit, in an academic institution, or in, say, a private company or even a public company where there may be incentives based on performance and things
Right.
like that, which you could have in the other ones too, but this could based on stock price or
Yeah.
sale price,
Yeah.
revenues, things like that.
Yeah.
So how do you bring some of those into the into
First, again, you got to know what's really important to you. And I was helping. There's someone I was working with that I'm working with now, but that he was offered the top spot, the CEO role of this company that he had worked there for 7 years, and they were basically asking him, what are you looking for?" And he had no idea. So I said, look, you're going to be the CEO anyway. Ask him for a copy of the other guy's contract. Say,
Hmm,
I'd like to see the current CEO's contract. And I will write up a contract that I feel makes sense for me. And they did. And great. So let's raise the price. You just talked about equity and stuff like that. So anyway, there's a theme here, Raj. When it comes to negotiation, one of the things that you, Raj, and I both agree with is the more you can get them to talk and show their cards and find out what their interests are, and ideally know what their walkaway is, and also if they have the competition. There's a guy I literally just got off the phone with who he was an interim role and he just interviewed. It was a national search, and the boss said, "I'm so excited. We're offering you the position." And he's got a lot of things that he wants to be able to say yes in order for him to be able to be as successful as he wants in carrying out his vision for this. And he was telling me, I showed appreciation, but wow, we got off I think he just thinks I'm in, right? Because
hmm,
he heard what he wanted to hear. And that happens sometimes too, where the
mhm.
other side just hears what they want to hear. And sometimes you have to be really explicit. Look, really excited about the opportunity here. I hope we can make it work, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Just a little bit sharpen it. Words I use are gotta sharpen the pencil a little bit, stuff like that, just to get
Right.
them to actually come back with a little bit of an offer. Sometimes I say things like, "We're really close. There's just a couple things I wanna go over." Things like that. So
That's
you whittle. Well, yeah.
We're really close. A couple of things I want to go over. I want 5 times what you offer me.
Yeah. Hopefully, we're not there.
Yeah.
So those are some of the do's. Are there any other, do's that we left out before we get into the don'ts?
Let's see. So one is the more you can also talk about it. I just alluded this in the last piece I said, but the more you can make this about the role and what you're stepping into, whether it's running the company or a division or department. And so it's about the value of what you can do, meaning what you bring to the table and what the role is requiring you to do, right? So you want to be thinking the value. If I said, Raj, I have a house, it's $1 million, you want to buy it. You don't know whether to say yes or no. Is it worth, first of all, it's $1 million worth $1 million. I'm not in the market for a house, but it's a full $50 million house that I'm able to get for $1 million for some weird reason. And
Mm.
so if you frame things not about what I want because I love money, but because what feels right for the value that I bring and what's right for this role, that's the focus.
And are there data sources that you could go to understand what your worth actually is? Obviously, not what your current salary is at your current role, but for the actual role that you're applying to.
So there's market, you can look and see what's in the market, right? So the government, the was it labor and
Bureau of Labor
yeah,
Statistics.
statistics
Yes.
has a bunch of the average salary and things like that. So you can, and if you're in a field, you probably know what certain colleagues make, kind of thing. So
Mhm.
it starts there. So it starts with the market is, and you want to look at the range of the market. You want to already start a little bit on the higher end, and then you want to add to it the additional value that you can bring to that role.
Okay. Let's pivot now to the things that you should avoid doing. What's on the top of your do not do this list?
Number one is don't negotiate against yourself. So again, like my previous caller, he said, quite frankly, like the salary isn't that important to me. He's like, why don't I just tell him I can take, I'm like, slow down, right? They haven't necessarily said no to they're trying to trim the edges, but they haven't said no to everything. I said, when you go to buy a car, right? And they ask you about your current car, what are you going to do with your current car? You obviously say, "Oh, I'm keeping my other car, giving it to my kid." And then when you finally finish negotiating on the new car, you say, "Oh, actually, you know what? I am going to sell this car. What would you buy it for?" Because you're not trying to give them something play with to try to negotiate against your better offer, right? They're going to make it look like they're giving you a great offer for that car. In the same way, you don't want to negotiate against yourself. So going to my client, let's keep that there. That's your ace in the back, in your back pocket, because you know that you don't really care that much. They don't know that yet. Let's get to as far as you can with this is important, this is important, these three things are the most important. And then when you feel like you got as much as you can, then you can come back and say, look, I'd be willing to take a 10% calorie salary cut if we can have these things over here.
Yeah. And sometimes you can negotiate deferred compensation as well. Depending on what your age is, if you're making plenty of money at a younger age and maybe you want to put more away for retirement, for example, there are different packages that they can go sharpen their pencil and talk to their 401k plan manager and see what options there are for those types of packages. And I know that I'm on the boards of other organizations and we've actually negotiated very strategic ways to retain a senior executive that we've been very pleased with, say on contract renewal, where salary wasn't as important to them, but what was deferred compensation, which can then have some sort of vesting period, which then locks that executive in. And if you're the executive and you're open to that, then that's a great way to go.
Yes, going back to this call that I was on 2 days ago with the person that had negotiated his CEO compensation, we were actually, so that was a while ago, we were actually talking about he wants to bring somebody in the company that he thinks would be amazing, but he wants to put him on a base plus, commission and put him in a sales role that my guy thinks that this other guy would be great for, but this guy doesn't really have a background in sales and is worried that he could fail. So if he takes this $150,000 base, like that feels like that's not what he wants 200,000. But yeah, but my guy's going, but yeah, but like you could make 2% of a million plus plus. And so what I said to the CEO, I said, look, tell him, look, his other company just went under. I said, tell him, look, you take the base, you're going to get the commission structure, and you're buying a year. And look, in a year, you're buying yourself a year. You're gonna get your $150,000. It's not 200 that you think, but we both think there's a huge upside. I can't give you 200,000. Doesn't make sense. And we'll both know in a year. And then look, if it doesn't work out a year, it doesn't work out. And my guy was like, "Yeah, God, that's great." To get this guy just to think about it's a year. So going back to your deferred compensation, one of the other kinds of things that I've structured people, I said, "Look, you don't know me. I don't know you. There's certainly a chance that this could not be a good fit. We're both here because we think this would be an amazing fit. And I still think I'm going to be able to do amazing things. But how about this? We go to this package here right now, but we put in the contract if a year from now I meet the metrics that we're already talking about, then it bumps automatically here. Right. So
Yeah.
you're trying to it's all about managing risk for you and managing risk for them.
I love the way that that approach can help you get more compensation just by saying, "Look, if I get to these metrics," and you discuss what those are, you can actually have a much better long-term result from your compensation package. What Yeah,
Yeah, because the only thing that's maybe stopping them from giving you more than they want to give you is they're not quite sure you're worth it.
yeah,
You can prove that you're worth it. So
yeah.
let's take that number off the table. Let's put it on the table, but let's put it on the table that's a table in a year from now.
Are there any other things that you would classify as a "do not do this" list?
So do not get too excited and do not get too apathetic. So when I say you offer me that, okay, you don't want to lose the bigger picture, right? If they think that you're really not happy, particularly if you really are happy and you're just trying to negotiate a much higher thing, if they think you're really not happy, that could be a problem, right? Because for lots of reasons, right? Then it does make it look like the money was way more important than what you could do for the company and working everything you told them before. But if you're way too excited, wow, really? That's great. You've just closed the door on any further negotiations. So the don't is don't get too excited, don't be too apathetic. The do here is just Goldilocks, just the right amount, right? You want to just say, I really appreciate the offer. You think about if you ever watch Shark Tank, good entrepreneur is she's Kevin. I really appreciate the offer. Could you go to 3%?
Yeah. Let me ask you about this one feeling that some people might have. Sometimes they might have an offer that's just so good it's hard to refuse, but their heart just might not be in it. And that's really difficult to deal with because it's a great compensation package, could mean opening up lots of doors for your family financially because you'll be able to accomplish more things. Maybe you want to do some charitable work, but for some reason, there's just something nagging and there's something that's making you hesitate, which is more emotional, not coming out of your head, but more from your heart. What do you say to somebody who's feeling like that?
This is why I say you have to do your work on the front end to know what's really important to you, right? Because when money starts getting thrown around, and if it's an offer that sounds too good to refuse, but something doesn't feel right, that something that doesn't feel right is probably a wise voice. And if you've already done your pre work and what's most important to you, then you're not distracted by the money. Because what happens is once you're thinking about the money and what you just said, about what it could do for our family, and we could finally move into a nice neighborhood, whatever it is, then you can fool yourself and ending up taking the offer and then regretting it.
Yeah. And that's terrible. That would
For
be just,
everybody, for
yeah,
everybody, for the
exactly.
company, for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Jeff, thank you so much. Very enlightening conversation. I certainly hope that it helps executives figure out what their executive compensation package should look like and how to negotiate one that's going to be in line with what your goals are. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Great. Good seeing you.